So Dan, what type of farmers historically were the Red River Métis in Manitoba?
Okay. Yeah, our first history of evidence that the Métis were farming in the Red River country area is 1806, early 1800s. They had small Red River lots, farms, ranging in size from maybe 10 acres up to 400 acres. Every farm had a small garden or a large garden. They also had some open area for cereal crops and things like that, and haylands. And they also would have horses, because that was their main mode of transportation. They would have cattle, they would have sheep, they would have chickens. So it was what we would have seen back in the 1930s, essentially, on any Western Canadian farm, very small scale subsistence. And they would also have off-farming endeavors such as paid labor. They would also do other cultural endeavors like hunting of buffalo, for example. They would go out on the buffalo hunt.
Okay. And in your presentation, it showed that the Métis had quite an export system for a lot of the things that they raised. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Hudson's Bay Company is interesting because they kept really good journals of everything, the comings and goings of people, the weather at their trading posts, but they also detailed what was coming into the settlement from the England, essentially, through their system, but they would also note what was going out through produce. And so the produce that they would look at is mainly pemmican, which is buffalo meat that's being ground down and fat and berries added to it and ground into pemmican. And then they would also look at some of the surplus. So because it was a mixed economy in the Red River, there wasn't huge amounts of surplus because people were farming just enough to provide for their own families and their kin and their community. But if there was surplus, it would be a little bit of surplus in a whole bunch of areas. So everything from wood, oak planks to hops and beer, chickens, all the livestock, seeds, vegetables. And a lot of this wouldn't make it, like the pemmican wouldn't make it back, but the furs would make it back to England. But the rest of the agricultural goods would stay within Western Canada. They would get sent to forts in Fort Edmonton, for example. They would go through the system, and instead, because otherwise the food would have to be imported from England to run the Hudson's Bay Company system. So the Red River really became the local production to run the Hudson's Bay Company.
Now, settlement on the Red River was quite extensive, but there was some challenges for the settlers that came over. Yeah. What were the Métis contributions like during that period, and what are some of the misconceptions around that?
Yeah, so this is an important part of our history because the Selkirk settlers, when they came late in the year, and every group that came after that, they were ill-equipped. They were ill-equipped as far as knowledge, because they weren't really farmers themselves. A few were, but a lot of them were ex-soldiers and things like that. A lot of them didn't have the proper implements. They didn't have the proper local knowledge of the landscape and where to plant and when to expect frosts and flooding and locusts and stuff like that. And so they relied on the Métis initially to help support them. And this happened, what happened was immediately when the governor at the time, Semple, saw that the settlers were going to starve the first winter, he made a Pemmican proclamation which stated no food can leave the Red River settlement. It has to be sold to the Hudson's Bay Company so that they can in turn give it to the Selkirk settlers so they would survive. And so this happened for about 3 years. And this led to what we call the Pemmican Wars. And eventually this culminates in big battle between the Métis and the Hudson's Bay Company, which the Métis won. And this is the Métis, the Red River Métis of Vimy Ridge, essentially, was they're coming out as a country, as a nation. And so this is where Cuthbert Grant Jr., the Warden of the Plains, the real forefather, the first father of the Métis Nation, flies the Métis flag into battle. And so this leads to the settlers eventually vacate the Red River area by 1835, 37, somewhere in that time.
Is there anything you wanted to add I didn't ask you about when it comes to Métis agricultural history?
Well, the Métis, the Red River Métis and Peguis specifically, bring agriculture, subsistence agriculture into Western Canada. They're the ones that, or we are the ones that innovated and, essentially ironed out and made and created the pathway for Western agriculture the way it is. The Hudson's Bay Company had early model farms that didn't work out, so they didn't really do a good job of experimenting, and so Western agriculture relied on Indigenous food systems and their agricultural systems, including the Red River Métis, to do this. So when the influx of settlers come in 1870 and afterwards, they're hiring Red River Métis to be the laborers for them. And so that knowledge transfer is happening through the white farmers, the modern settler farmer, through hiring and interacting with Red River Métis that are throughout the prairies. So that's, I think, how some of that gets transferred, that knowledge gets transferred.
Great, thanks for your time, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.